Section 2 of Humour of the North. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sean Michael Hogan. Humour of the North, arranged by Lawrence J. Burpee. Section 2. Stories by Thomas Chandler Haliburton. Sheepskins and Politics. You know Uncle Tim. He was small, very small, not in stature, for he was a 6-footer, but small in mind and small in heart. His soul was no bigger than a flea's. "Zeb, my boy," says he to me one day, "always be neuter in elections. You can't get nothin' by them but ill will. Dear, dear, I wish I had never voted. I never did but oncest, and dear, dear, I wish I had let that alone. There was an army doctor oncest, Zeb, lived right opposite to me to Digby. Dear, dear, he was a good friend to me. He was very fond of wether mutton, and when he killed a sheep he used to say to me, 'Friend Tim, I will give you the skin if you will accept it.' Dear, dear, what a lot of them he gave me, first and last. Well, oncest the doctor's son, Lawyer Williams, offered for the town, and so did my brother-in-law, Finn Tucker, and dear, dear, I was in a proper fix. Well, the doctor asked me to vote for his son, and I just up and told him I would, only my relation was candidating also, but gin him my hand and promised I would be neuter. Well, I told brother-in-law the same, that I'd vote for him with pleasure, only my old friend, the doctor's son, was offering too, and therefore gave him my word also, I'd be neuter. And oh, dear, dear, neuter I would have remained too, if it hadn't have been for them two electioneering generals, devils I might say, Laurie Scott and Terry Todd. Dear, dear, somehow or another they got hold of the story of the sheepskins, and they gave me no peace day or night. 'What,' says they, 'are you going to sell your country for a sheepskin?' The day of the election they seized on me, one by one arm and the other by the other, and lugged me off to the poll, whether I would or no. 'Who do you vote for?' said the sheriff. 'Would you sell your country for a sheepskin?' shouted Terry in one ear. 'Would you sell your country for a sheepskin?' bellowed Laurie in the other ear. I was so frightened I hardly knew what I did, but they tell me I voted for Brother Finn. Dear, dear, the doctor never gave me a sheepskin while he lived after that. Dear, dear, that was an ugly vote for me. The Doctor. Old Dr. Green, you knowed him, in course, everybody knowed him, lived on Digby Neck. He was reckoned a skilful man, and was known to be a regular rotated doctor, but he drank like a fish, and it's actually astonishing how many country doctors have taken to drink. And, of course, he warn't always a very safe man in cases where a cool head and a steady hand was needed, though folks did say he knowed a plaguey sight more, even when he was drunk, than one half of them do when they are sober. Well, one day old Jim Reed, who was a pot companion of his, sent him a note to come into town immediately, without the loss of one moment of time, and bring his amputating instruments with him, for there was a most shocking accident had happened to his house. So in come the doctor as hard as he could drive, looking as sorry all the time as if he didn't live by misfortunes and accidents, the old hypocrite. "My dear friend," said he solemnly to Reed, and a taking of him by the hand and giving it a doleful shake, "my dear friend, what is the matter? Who is hurt? And what the devil is to pay now? How thankful we all ought to be that the accident hasn't occurred to one whom we all respect so much as you." And then he unpacked his instruments, off with his coat, and up with his sleeves, and with one hand pulls a hair out of his head, and with the other takes his knife and cuts it in two, to prove the edge was all right. Then he began to whistle while he examined his saw, for nothing puts these chaps in such good humour as cutting and slashing away at legs and arms, operating, as they call it, and when all was ready, says he, "Reed," says he, tapping him on the shoulder, "where is the patient?" Well, Reed opened the door of another room, and there was a black boy a-holding of a duck on the table that had broken his leg. "There is a case for amputation, doctor," said he. "But, first of all, take a glass of brandy and water to steady your nerves." "He knows you," says he. "Hear him how he calls out 'quack, quack' after you, as if he was afraid to let you perform on him." Well, the doctor entered into the joke as good-natured as possible, laughed like anything, whipped down the grog, whipped off the leg, and whipped up the knives and saws in no time. "You must stay to dine, doctor," said Reed, for the joke was only intended to get him into town to drink along with him. And he stayed to dine, and stayed to sup, and being awful drunk, stayed to bed too. Well, every time Reed saw him arter that in town, he asked him to come in and see his patient, which meant to come in and drink. And so he did as long as the cask of rail, particular Jamaiky, lasted. Some time after that the old fellow sent in a bill for operating, making a wooden leg, medical attendance, and advice per order for £25. And what's more, when Reed wouldn't pay it, the doctor sued for him to court, and gained his cause. Fact, I assure you. Mother hunts chickens. 5 years ago, come next summer, the old lady made a trip to Halifax in one of our Digby coasters to see Sister Susanna, that is married in that city to Ted Fowler, the upholsterer, and took a whole lot of little notions with her to market to bear expenses. For she is a saving kind of body, his mother, and likes to make two ends meet at the close of the year. Among the rest was the world and all of eggs, for she was a grand hand in a poultry yard. Some she stowed away in boxes, and some in baskets, and some in tubs, so that no one accident could lose them all for her. Well, under the berths in the cabin were large drawers for bedding, and she rotated that out and packed them full of eggs and wool, as snug as you please, and off they started on their voyage. Well, they had nothing but calms, and light airs or head winds, and were ever so long in getting to town, and when they anchored she got her duds together and began to collect her eggs all ready for landing. The first drawer she opened, out hopped ever so many chickens on the cabin floor, skipping and hopping about, a-chirping chick, 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 like anything. "Well, if that don't beat all," said Mother, and she looked the very picture of doleful dumps. "I hope there is no more of them a-coming into the world that way without being sent for." And she opened a second, and out came a second flock with a chick, 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 and another, till she pulled them all out. The cabin floor was chock full of them, for the heat and confined bilge air had hatched all the eggs that were in the close and hot drawers. Oh, the captain and passengers and sailors, they roared with laughter. Mother was awful mad, for nothing makes one so angry as accidents that set folks off a-tee-heeing that way. If anybody had been to blame but herself, wouldn't they have caught it, that's all, for scolding is a great relief to a woman. But as there weren't, there was nothing left but to cry, and scolding and crying are two safety valves that have saved many a heart from busting. Well, the loss was not great, though she liked to take care of her coppers too. It was the vexation that worried her. But the worst was to come yet. When she returned home, the boys to Digby got hold of the story, and wherever she went they called out after her, "Chick, chick, chick!" I skinned about half a dozen of the little imps of mischief for it, but it only made them worse. For they hid in porches and behind doors and gates and fences, and seen her a-coming, and roared out, "Chick, chick, chick!" and nearly bothered her to death. So she gave up going out any more, and never leaves home now. It's my opinion her rheumatism is nothing but the effect of want of exercise, and all comes from that cursed chick, chick, chick. The Deacon's Bargain. Old Deacon Bruce of Aylesford last Monday week bought a sleigh of his fellow deacon, Squire Burns, for £5. On his way home with it, who should he meet but Zeke Morse, a-trudging along through the snow afoot. "Friend Zeke," says the old Christian, "won't you get in and ride? Here's room for you, and welcome." "Don't care if I do," said Zeke, seeing that sitting is as cheap as walking if you don't pay for it. So he hops in, and away they go. Well, Zeke was mightily taken with the sleigh. "Deacon," says he, "how shall you and me trade for it? It's just the article I want, for I am a-going down to Bridgetown next week to be married, and it will suit me to a notch to fetch Mrs. Morse, my wife, home in. What will you take for it?" £9, said old Conscience. "It cost me £7 10 to Deacon Burns, who built it, and as it's the right season for using it, and I can't get another made till next winter, I must have £9 for it, and it ain't dear at that price neither." "Done," says Zeke, for he is an off-hand kind of chap, and never stands bantering and chaffering a long time, but says at once what he means, as I do. "Done," says he, "'tis mine." And the deacon drives up to his house, gets his pay, and leaves the sleigh there. Next morning, when Zeke went to examine his purchase, he found there was a bolt left out by mistake. So off he goes to the maker, Deacon Burns, to get it put in, when he ups and tells him all about the bargain. "Did the old gentleman tell you my price was £7 10?" said he. "Oh, yes," said Zeke, "in course he did. There was no mistake about it. I'll take my oath to it." "Well, so it was," said Burns. "He told you true. He used to give me £7 10, but as there was nobody by but him and me when we traded, and as it ain't paid for yet, he might perhaps forget it, for he is getting to be an old man now. Will you try to recollect it?" "Certainly," says Zeke. "I'll swear to it any day you please, in any court in the world, for them was his very words to me." What does Deacon Burns do but go right off and sue Deacon Bruce for £7 10 instead of £5, the real price, called Zeke as a witness to his admission, and gained his case. Fact, upon my soul. End of Section 2. Recording by Sean Michael Hogan, St. John's, Newfoundland, Canada.